Well, good morning and welcome back. I read this article which stated that if you want to have a stable marriage, let the wife have her way. In other words, the man should concede to his wife's viewpoint when there is a disagreement or differing of opinions. I posted the article in my office and I wrote, never fight to the last man. And then I called my wife and asked her what she thought about it. Did you know that the Catholic Church is the leading cause of arthritis and osteoporosis in the world? You see all the parishioners coming to church with walkers, canes, and wheelchairs. It's the ups and downs they put you through every Sunday. You sit down, the priest comes in, he motions you to get up, he makes an introductory statement and sits down. He does a few more things, you get back up. Though I am a Catholic, I don't go to church very often and I don't know any of the prayers, maybe just small parts. You sit down, you get up, you kneel, you get up again. No wonder there's so many of the older folks that have trouble walking or limping into the church. The church ruins your hips and knees. The NFL, which is very tough on your joints, and they play for 17 weeks in the year, not counting the playoffs. The Catholic Church is 52 weeks in the year. About 25 to 30 years ago, Virgin Atlantic moved their corporate headquarters to Norwalk, Connecticut, where we live. They moved to the downtown area, and I'm thinking to myself, where are they going to put the planes? So when I met with a financial planner years ago, I got the expected question: what are your objectives and long-term goals? This evidently is what they teach you when you become a financial planner. I didn't actually say this to the planner, but I'm thinking to myself, what do you think they are? For me, I want to make as much money as possible in the shortest period of time, and I wouldn't mind retiring in the next year or so. I want dividend checks coming out of my ass. Isn't that everyone's objective? What are you going to tell this person? Oh, yeah, I'd like to make a little loose change every quarter so I can have a nice little nest egg in 30 to 35 years. Fuck that. In my hand, I have the patient information form for a prescription drug from our local pharmacy. And let me share this with you. This was probably 25, 30 years ago. These are the actual side effects from the drug, and they are swelling of feet or legs, unusual weight gain, black tarry stools, vomiting material that looks like coffee grounds, severe nausea or vomiting, changes in menstrual periods, headaches, muscle weakness or prolonged nausea or vomiting, or prolonged sore throat or fever. Can you imagine having to go through all of this just to clear up a skin rash? I expected the skin rash would go away on its own if you just ignored it, because some of these side effects could take you down for good. My wife has a book entitled Cooking Without Salt. 200 pages of what? If you don't want to cook with salt, don't cook with salt. What could they possibly fill up 200 pages with? I suppose they could provide you the recipe, but also end up or start with no salt. No salt needed. Have you ever thought that the difference between adults and children is that the adults can't play anymore? Have you ever thought that the highest order in the universe is the chaos of children? That the best movie you could ever see is watching your children watch a funny movie? That the best conversation I ever had was with my 6-year-old son, and it was about video games. The best thing I ever wrote was this, or that the second best thing I ever wrote was writing this down. The first best was to live it. And this was from something I wrote back in December of 1998 when my children were very young. Women brag about multiple orgasms. I don't know. What are they bragging about? I've had multiple orgasms. They were a week apart, but it was still multiple orgasms. Now, what's the deal with some of these street signs? I have no idea what some of them mean. I don't want to offend anyone, but does slow deaf child mean that the child on the street is slow and deaf? Or does it mean slow down, there's a deaf child on the street? And the sign slippery when wet. I don't know anything that isn't slippery when it's wet, except for a sponge, of course. And blind curve or blind driveway head, of course it's blind. I haven't gotten there yet, or how am I going to see it anyways? And then falling rock zone is my favorite. Have you ever seen some of these boulders sitting 150 feet above you on a slope of about 90 degrees? They're the size of a house, and I don't think the sign is going to do me any good. If this boulder gets dislodged and starts heading in my direction, it's over, sign or no sign. Oh yeah, thanks for the precaution. Here it comes now. It's about to turn me into a liquid, and I'll turn into oncoming traffic. This guy asked me once if I was prejudiced, and I said, no, I hate everybody. Two lines I never want to hear again. This isn't brain surgery, and this isn't rocket science. And thankfully, we don't hear this much anymore, which is a good thing. There was a time, there was a time when it seemed that everyone was talking about self-esteem. This person has high self-esteem. This one does not have high self-esteem. I tend to think that low self-esteem is not derogatory and more natural than its opposite and a good thing. And why, you ask? It's tough out there and you get beat up a lot. It means you can take it and aren't so wrapped up in yourself. You have humility, and isn't humility a virtue? So, how is low self esteem not a virtue? And what's someone with high self esteem? They're arrogant bastards. That's what they are. I read this article about the first cultures to produce written text. This is a good one. They claim that in the year 3200 BC, the Sumerians were the first to write organized text. And it's funny because in the article, they showed an example of a Sumerian stylus with the ingredients for beer. Now, somehow, I'm not surprised that beer was the impetus for the first written text. A sip of beer, and these people are saying to themselves, I got to write this down. And I was working on this project at work with some people, and they were trying to describe what they think they wanted me to do. And in doing so, we're not really sure what we want. And I said, well, I guess whatever I give you is going to be fine. I remember the time when my son was going to receive his first Holy Communion and asking for forgiveness for their sins. So my wife, myself, and my two sons went up to see the priest and asked if he wants to, if you want to confess your sins and if you want absolution for your sins. My wife is a Latina, and as is the priest, and we had a pretty bad fight recently, and for a couple of weeks we weren't really speaking to each other, and this was years ago. And I figured that this is a good time to ask for redemption. Well, I explained the situation to Father Otto, and he knows my wife is a Latina, and he says, God will grant absolution for your sins, but she won't. Shit, she's a Latina, man. God's one thing, but this is a full-blooded Latina. I can't help you with this one. Good luck, brother. You're gonna go to the grave with this one. You cannot cross the Latina women. That's above God's jurisdiction. We recently called the Teamsters 1-800 number as my father, and this was again years ago, as my father was a Teamster, we had a question on his benefits. The guy picked up the phone and asked, you got a problem? My son just went to the doctor. This obviously was years ago, but he had to get a hepatitis shot, and the nurse called us into the office. She's making small talk with my son, and she gently rolls up his sleeve. And of course, he's a little nervous in getting the shot, and she reaches into her pocket and flash, she injects him with a serum. I was like, wait a second, I blinked, I missed that. How could I see that again? I missed it. I want to see it. I would not want to get into a duel with her. She was quick, man. Brilliant strategy. He never knew it hit him, and I never saw it. My wife woke up one morning years ago telling me that in her dream she had a potential affair but rejected him. And I was like, my advice to her was to go back to sleep and have the affair. Don't reject someone in your dreams. That's what dreams are for. Why would you want to turn someone down in your dreams? But maybe you honor our marriage more than I thought, and I ain't all that bad anyway. So. And again, these are all segments from years ago when the kids were young. And on this particular day up at the Cape, we were driving home. My son said, Dad, I don't think I like you. And I responded by saying, it's okay, son. But you know what? I have a great tan. That's all that matters right now. And my wife went to the wake of a close friend, and she saw what the widow was going through. And she came home that night saying, it's very tough losing your spouse. I hope I die first. I don't want to lose you. To which I replied, and me too. And I'm out.